Speaker of the House of Representatives, Yakubu Dogara, on Monday received communication from President Muhammadu Buhari on his resumption to duty. Speaking shortly after the letter was handed over to him by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly Matters, House of Representatives, Suleiman Abdurrahman Kau Sumaila, Dogara said he will read the letter to his colleagues at plenary today, since the communication was meant for them. He expressed delight at the harmonious working relationship between the executive and the National Assembly and promised to cooperate in the interest of the people. The Nigeria Customs Service says the new customs car duty payment policy is not targeted at individual car owners, but those who engage in smuggling of vehicles. The Controller General of the Nigeria Customs Service, Colonel Hamid Ali, retired, made this clarification when some members of the House of Representatives Tactical Committee on Economic Recession visited the Customs House, Abuja.
On a quick win basis.
Only when your car is due for licensing, that you go there. And then our men will be there with the computer, they will compute your VIN number, and it will show whether you have paid, that car the duty has been paid for it or not.
Nigeria and South Africa have agreed to establish an early warning center in order to help prevent violence against their nationals, especially on Nigerians in South Africa. This was at the media briefing which took place at the Ministry of International Relations and Cooperation in South Africa while addressing the xenophobic attacks in that country.
The President, the government, and the people of South Africa reaffirm that which is in our Constitution, that we will fight against all forms of discriminations based on race, religion, sex, or creed, including Afrophobia.
South Africa, the government of South Africa is fully with us, fully supportive of Nigerians, welcoming of Nigerians here in this country.
Well, the 2016 tuberculosis report ranks Nigeria highest in Africa with the disease and the fourth in the world. This announcement was made at a press conference organized by Challenge Tuberculosis in Nigeria, a USAID-funded project, which also highlighted the importance of effective collaboration and coordination by multiple stakeholders to reduce the current disease burden in the country.
TB cases in the country are undetected, implying that there are a lot of undiagnosed TB cases in the community which serve as reservoir for continued transmission of TB.
Very low knowledge about tuberculosis within our community. One of our colleagues did mention that less than 25% of Nigerians have the correct information about tuberculosis.
The Abuja Light Rail is expected to become operational by the first quarter of next year. FCT Minister Mohammed Musa Bello stated this shortly after an inspection tour of the project in Abuja. The ongoing construction of lots 1A and 3, covering 45 kilometers from Abuja city center through Idu and Kubwa, and the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport is 90% completed.
You need signaling, you need management, and you need the workshop. These are the ones that we are working on. But overall, I'm very happy with the percentage level of work.
The federal government has deployed a new batch of 200 youths from the Niger Delta region for training in automobile manufacturing technology at a partner car plant in Nnewi, Anambra State. Well, the move, which comes under the auspices of the Presidential Amnesty Program, is also in pursuit of developing requisite skills to actualize the national automotive policy of local production.
Auto spray painting, and I really love that department. That's why I joined it, because in my area, in my community, they don't have anything like that.
Plan is that there will be an establishment for an assembling plant in Bayelsa. The Akwa Ibom State government has shown interest as well, and these delegates that have been trained both previously and the ones presently here will be employed.
Well, that's the news for now. The program continues with Rhoda and Kingsley after this break.
hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief. Try new Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. New Nurofen Express works at the source of pain. Fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
All right, welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. Now let's talk business. The federal government seeks central banks cooperation in extending verification of bank accounts to microfinance banks to check salary malpractices. And the Nigerian Stock Exchange resumes this week in a red. Let's get more details from Leah Katung Babatunde.
The Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, has strongly solicited the cooperation of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, in extending the requirement for bank verification number BVN to account holders in microfinance banks, MFBs, to facilitate the detection of bank accounts which might have been opened and operated in such banks for ghost workers by fraudulent syndicates. The minister, who sought the cooperation of the governor of the central bank in that regard, in a correspondence addressed to him, said that the introduction of BVN has contributed immensely in improving the integrity of the federal government payroll, on which more than 50,000 ghost workers were detected and removed. A statement by the Director Press through the Ministry Salisuna in Ambata quoted Adeosun as stating that operating bank accounts in microfinance banks without requirements for BVN has left a huge loophole which individuals intent on financial crimes could use to hide and launder proceeds of crime and successfully escape detection by law enforcement agencies, while noting that extending the requirement for BVN to microfinance banks may put a huge financial strain on the smaller microfinance banks. The minister pointed out that some MFBs have large number of salary accounts, and the inability to perform checks on such a large number of salary earners is a key risk. The CBN had in September 2016 announced its intention to extend the requirement for the extension of the bank verification number to MFBs in the country but the exercise is yet to take off. On the Treasury single account, TSA has taken the federal government out of the era of indiscriminate borrowings by MDAs and saved it an average of 4.7 billion naira monthly. Accountant General of the Federation, Ahmed Idris, while responding to questions from journalists in Abuja, added that the scheme had also helped to weed out more than 20,000 multiple bank accounts spread across various deposit money banks. He, however, clarified that not all components of the Consolidated Revenue Fund are for immediate expenditure.
Right now, we are talking with some program developers because we observe that for teaching hospitals, there are endowment funds, and universities, there are endowment funds, there are third-party funds, there are funds which really are not meant revolving funds. So we will deploy technology to sift out those funds, separate from normal conventional revenues, so that we get to where we are.
The federal government has raked in about 5.244 trillion naira into the Treasury single account since it flagged off the scheme last year. According to the AGF, the TSA allows government banking to be unified as it enables the relevant stakeholders such as the Ministry of Finance and the Office of the Accountant General to have full oversight of all cash flows across different banks' accounts and serves as a check on incidents of idle cash lying over extended periods in bank accounts. Moving on to the equities market, the Nigerian Stock Exchange resumed the week in the red to see the all-share index shed 0.4%, while the market capitalization closed at 8.699 trillion naira. 135 million equities swept hands in 2,909 deals. UBA Capital, Union Bank, and Ecobank led the gainers, while the losers were led by 40 Oil, Livestock Feeds, and NAM Insurance. Diamond Bank, FBN Holdings, and Fidelity Bank emerged the most sought-after stock. Now, an estimated 3,000 jobs are to be created when the dry port slated for Abia State comes on stream. The Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Shippers Council, Hassan Bello, gave this indication when he visited Abia State Governor Okeze Ikpeazu. Ikpeazu said that Abia is ready to fast-track export of locally made goods and services.
1 million pesos should leave the shores of Abia State every week. That was coast of Africa. You can consign your goods from everywhere in the world to this place. And then we have all the facilities. Then we have all the regulatory authorities.
Project, which is a 50,000 containers port facility, will serve Aba, Onitsha, Enugu, Ebonyi, Imo, Delta, and Benue states. And that wraps up business news for this hour. Thank you for watching.
Thank you very much there, Leah Katung Babatunde, for the business package. Next for us now, a review of the headlines in some of today's newspapers.
All right, our regular newspaper reviewer, Bayo Toyebi, is already in the studio. Bayo, good morning.
Morning, Rhoda. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, again, a pleasure to have you join us for today's review.
Thank you.
Of course, the story that we'll expect on the front pages of most of the papers this morning is the resumption of work by President Muhammadu Buhari after his 7-week vacation. That's, of course, included a medical leave in the UK. Let's begin by taking a look at the front page of This Day newspaper. This Day is the first for us. You see there, the lead story says, Buhari resumes. Shibajo says, President reasonably satisfied with his performance. That's in quotes there. And with two writers, National Assembly gets resumption letter, and President directs VP to lead mediation team on Niger Delta crisis. And that's the lead story for This Day newspaper. As I said, you also find it on the other, on the front pages of the other papers that we have this morning. But let's quickly take a look at the other headlines. Immediately below the nameplate of This Day, you have other headlines. It says, Dangote Refinery orders compressors and turbines from German firm. And above the nameplate says, NSA, that is the National Security Advisor, restricts helicopter shuttle during Abuja airport closure. And still further above the nameplate, supply glut. Banks now seek customers to buy FX. That's above the nameplate of this day. Another headline that we are taking from the front page says, Customs backtracks, says it won't force car owners to pay duties. And of course, you have a number of actions there, legal action by Vaughan, unnecessary, that's according to him. And then vehicle owners in Kaduna, Port Harcourt, Bauchi, and others, Sean directive, and Lagos recalls low turnout. Now, you also find there on the front page of this day newspaper the photograph showing the two citizens, number one and number two, president and vice president, at the president's office yesterday. And this day captions it, what God has joined together.
All right, Daily Times, Daily Trust, is next. And of course, just as you said, it's leading with the same story, and that's the resumption of the president. It captions it this way: Buhari resumes work, National Assembly receives president's letter. Buhari resumes work, National Assembly receives president's letter. And just above that, you also see JAM begins sale of UTME forms March 20th. And the picture story there, of course, is that of President Muhammadu Buhari in his office at the presidential villa when he resumed work yesterday. Just below the picture stories, that's the foot of the paper, you'd see there, Rivers rerun trial of 23 INEC staff begins today. That's on page 35. On page 12 of the Daily Trust, police parade suspected killers of herdsmen. And finally, federal government revokes 54 broadcasting licenses. Federal government revokes 54 broadcasting licenses. That's on page 13 of the Daily Trust. Kingsley.
All right, let's go over to Bayo.
Yes, President Muhammadu Buhari, upon resuming yesterday, received briefed from several of his aides, and later on he held a long meeting with Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo. He also met with the governor of the Central Bank. Meanwhile, the president signed a letter communicating to the National Assembly, and in it is indicated, I have resumed my functions as president with effect from March 13, 2017, after vacation. The vice president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, also told State House correspondents, we just had a very long meeting where I tried to bring the president up to state on things done while he was away. He has given directions on what should be done in many areas, including the economy. He also indicated that the administration work as a team, and little is done without the president's clearance. He said, I am back to my regular position as vice president. Now, there was a story you read about 54 broadcast stations, both radio and television, may not be able to broadcast by the end of the month if they don't pay up the license fees they owe the National Broadcasting Commission. The Director General of the National Broadcasting Commission, Ishaq Modiboka, who also indicated that there are 120 other licensees who have paid for the license but have failed to commence broadcasting within the 2-year period that is required. Stations that are indebted have up to the end of the month to pay up what they owe, a total of about 5 billion, or they will have their licenses revoked. The DG reiterated that June 27 deadline for digital transmission is sacrosanct, and so stations should brace up for transition from analog to digital.
All right, Bayo, thank you very much. So let's go over now to the Nation newspaper. Let's check out the headlines on the front page of the Nation newspaper. Now, you see the above. Let's begin from top to bottom. Federal government to arraign 6 Boko Haram leaders today. Details of the story can be found inside. Now, the other headlines that you see by way of bullet points say Dixon, that's the governor of Bayelsa, may report a template to end PDP crisis, and federal government to save $200 million from fertilizer scheme, and NBC revokes, Bayo just discussed that, 54 radio and television stations licenses, and fans to Gunners owners don't sell Iwobi. Iwobi, of course, is a Nigerian playing for Arsenal. Now, just below the nameplate, exposed how corruption and favoritism thrive in Unilorry. That's part one. That's a special report. Of course, can be found inside. Now, the latest story of the nation says, with a double-decker headline, 500 million naira Party Club cash recovered from governor. With a rider, EFCC grills more suspects. Now, the facts and figures, according to the paper, are right there in the sidebar. Now, CBN moves to check forex abuse in banks. And the photograph you see there is of the president. We also saw the photograph on other front pages, the president alone and the president with the vice president. Oshibajo, Buhari fit for office. And then he says report blames pilot for Dana's 2012 crash. Details of the story can be found inside, as well as, of course, the IG promotion of some 25,000 police officers.
All right, I'll take it up from where you stood, and that's the Dana crash, and that's also leading on the Daily Times this morning, and it's just beside the nameplate. It reads, Dana crash, engine failure, pilot error responsible. With the riders, AIB releases final report on Bristol OS Pickham's air crashes. Dana crash, engine failure, pilot error responsible. The lead story is, of course, politicians besiege Aso Villa as Buhari resumes. With the riders there, Oshibajo ministers brief president, Borno governor's convoy in fatal auto crash on way to pay homage. National Assembly confirms receipt of resumption letter. President reasonably satisfied with my performance, statement accredited to the vice president. And the other stories there, court to rule on Ajudua's alleged $4.8 billion fraud, March 30. And just beside the picture story there, that's on page 14, court orders arrest of 2 Imo commissioners and 5 top government officials. And ghost workers extend BVN to microfinance banks, ministers advises CBN. And on page 12, Desiani named in Belgore, Suleiman's alleged 450 million naira scam. Those are the stories trending on the Daily Times this morning, Byron.
Yes, the Accident Investigation Bureau report concerns 4 crashes. Actually, the Dana air crash has been attributed to engine failure and also human error. It was said that 17 minutes into the flight, there was the first engine failure. And just when the pilot was about to land, the second engine failed and he had no control over the aircraft. It kept on going. Now, you recall that 156 passengers on board were all killed and 6 other persons were killed on the ground. The other 3 reports to also relate to 2 helicopters. OS helicopter, that one had a non-adherence to visual flight rules, and the second one actually had a technical fault which led to the helicopter catching fire. With the PICOM's, the Presidential Implementation Committee for Marine Security and Safety, it was said that the 2 pilots there were of the same capability, and when they were challenged, there was no senior experience to pull them through. But the report technically indicates measures, recommended measures that have to be taken to avoid such things in future. There was also the report that we read about JAMB. The difference this time around is that Joint Admission and Matriculation Board has fixed March 20th as the opening, and it will last this time for only 1 month. So candidates are required to take note. It will not last 3 months as previously, and there will be a mock examination on 1st of April, and the JAMB has indicated there will be no extension.
Yes, that's true. The mock exam is an
1st of April.
It's an innovation.
Yes.
Just for them to
have a familiarity with the
WASC mock exam. But of course, let's see how that pans out eventually. But Bayo, just talking about what the AIB released, quite clearly there was an earlier story. I think we read a story from one of the papers, or some of the papers last week, about the African skies being very safe in 2016. There were 0 crashes. Of course, for us here in Nigeria, it was pretty the same thing, except of course for some helicopters, that tumbled out of the skies.
Yes, there was one that was reported in Makurdi.
Yes.
It was described as tumbling. It wasn't a crash. The air safety, particularly even in the days of Nigerian Airways, the air safety record in Nigeria had always been exceptional. Except that, unfortunately, between the year 2013, 2011, 2012, these reports that were all came about that period. The encouraging news is that it's safe to travel in the Africa continent. Let me quickly draw attention to two human interest stories. Bauchi State government has closed Sad Zunguru primary and secondary school because students there were indulging in organizing marriage ceremonies. A student paid a dowry of 500 and his colleagues in an empty classroom were arranging a marriage. The Commissioner for Education, who is incidentally the Deputy Governor, has ordered the closure of the school, and the committee has been instituted to comprise directors in the Ministry of Education, the teachers in the college, and the Parent-Teacher Association to find about that. The second one
was it a drama class?
It wasn't a drama class, real class where they paid dowry, and the student, senior student of senior secondary school, SS2, getting married to one another in the school.
What, was it a boarding school? Or, but anyhow, those are details for them to find out.
Yes.
But I think that immediate closure, it's a high-handed measure. I mean, if you want to discipline students, these are not things that would warrant.
It wasn't an first instance. There was a second instance, and so they wanted to get full hands on that. The
All
second
right,
one is also
that's imitation at work.
Yes, the second one was also at a school, junior secondary school at Kachia. A teacher was flogging a student who incidentally came late. Unfortunately, the stick hit the girl in the eye, and the injury was serious. The girl lost the aqueous humor from her eye, and she may not be able to use the eye. But unfortunately, that is not seen as an accident in the discipline procedure, but is seen in the context of the native settler and Christian Muslim development in that southern part of Kaduna. Very unfortunate.
That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate. Bayo, let's look very quickly at the front page of New Telegraph. We'll just take a couple of headlines from New Telegraph. Just below the nameplate, PDP leaders fight dirty. You can see there are a number of riders there. So, as the saying goes, rather, the Rofo continues with them. Of course, the story of Vice President briefing. President says, I'm back as Vice President, and you see the two of them right there. And the APC staff to down tools over unpaid salaries. With a rider, cash crunch threatens party's mini convention. And lastly, a health copy there, sleeping late increases obesity risk. Now, those are the headlines we can take from the front pages this morning. Bayo, thank you for being with us today. See you tomorrow midweek.
Tomorrow will be another day. Thank you for having me.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing the manifold issues concerning the economic recovery and growth plan of the federal government.
Call of change, stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go so let the change begin from within. Look at you, Ogerula. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
When Ogenekume Pillar Egona was just 6 years old, she was diagnosed with cancer of the bone.
When I bumped my leg, I started to feel better, but my parents told me it was cancer.
I was shocked because it's something I couldn't imagine.
Her parents had to make a choice that would affect their daughter's future forever.
Touching lives.
Pump the jam, pump it up while your feet are
stomping, and the jam is pumping. Look ahead, the crowd is jumping. Pump up the jam and push up your hand. You know, say me fans them plenty like sun. Jump up and dance, make them understand. Say me energy could have never be contraband. No matter what life throws at me, I can handle it constantly. All of my fans them invited. DJ, make my day.
Make my day. Make my day. Make my day.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. As we indicated this morning, we are discussing the economic recovery and growth plan unveiled recently by the federal government. Now, to kickstart our conversation, let's take this background report put together by Ahmad Ambali, our correspondent.
Nigeria's economic recovery and growth plan could not have come at a better time when the nation is seeking a way out of recession and looking to achieve sustained diversification and inclusiveness. Set to run for 4 years, it's a medium-term plan that targets growth, human development, and global competitiveness. For those asking for a framework that could hold the economy out of recession, the Ministry of Budget, which launched it, is optimistic. This is the document. The ERGP has 3 main objectives, including restoration of growth, which has been elusive, investment in the people, and becoming a globally competitive economy. To restore growth, the ERGP focuses on macroeconomic stability through fiscal stimulus, monetary stability, and improved external balance of trade, and economic diversification by giving attention to agriculture, MSMEs, among others. The future the document posits is expected to be one where Nigeria becomes a net exporter of rice, cashew nuts, groundnuts, cassava, and vegetable oil by 2020. The self-sufficiency component also expects that by 2017, 2018, and 2020, tomato paste, rice, and wheat will also be exported. On paper, it looks a great plan, even as observers say the dearth of plans is not the challenge, but that of implementation. To get the plan to deliver, managers of the nation's economy need to tackle the age-long bedeviling factors of mismanagement, lack of coordination, and non-implementation. Guests on NTA's Good Morning Nigeria will be taking a go at the document and preferring solutions on how best to make it work.
All right, Ahmad Ambali, thank you very much there for that background report. Of course, we have with us here guests in the studios as well as at remote locations to further elaborate on the economic recovery and growth plan. First, at this time, we'd like to welcome to our studios the Honorable Minister of Budget and National Planning, Mr. Udoma Udoma. A pleasure to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And then we also have with us here in the studios Dr. Dikweolu Adeyemi, Special Advisor to the President on Economic Matters. Again, Special Advisor, a pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me.
And also we're being joined from our studios in Benin by Professor Mike Obada. He is a microeconomist from the University of Benin. Thank you, Prof, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And joining us via Skype from Kano is also Professor Garba Ibrahim Sheka. He's a professor of economics, Bayero University. It's a pleasure to have you join us again on Good Morning Nigeria. Garba Ibrahim Sheka. He's a professor of economics, Bayero University. Join us again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, now those are the guests who are with us for this conversation. 2 professors of economics, one at Benin Network Center, and then the other Professor Sheka. Of course, we've had both of them on the program in times past where we're discussing aspects of the economy. Let's begin with the Honorable Minister. Of course, this economic recovery and growth plan is the baby of your ministry, and our reporter indicated the snippets of of what the plan entails, talking about the various targets, what we intend to be doing at the end of, the plan, which is supposed to be 2020. But in general, what are the major plans of the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan?
Thank you very much. I think there are three objectives. The first is to restore growth. The second is to invest in our people. And the third is to improve our competitiveness, to make us a competitive economy. So those are the three broad objectives. Now, in order to achieve those broad objectives, we have 5 execution priorities. The first execution priority is to restore the macroeconomic stability. So that is the number one. And then because you have to, first of all, get investors' confidence back, restore macroeconomic stability in order to have the groundwork, to do the other things. And then the other 4 are, firstly, agriculture and food security. Agriculture is a low-hanging fruit. We've spent a lot of time and effort already on agriculture, and we're already seeing results from agriculture. The second is power. Energy, power, and petroleum self-sufficiency. You need energy for everything in the economy. So energy is the second, with power, and then petroleum self-sufficiency, because it is embarrassing that as a major petroleum crude oil producing country that we are not self-sufficient in petroleum products. Then the third is transportation infrastructure. We want to try and get our roads, our rail, our ports, our airports. We want to improve them dramatically. We're looking at a new standard rail train from Calabar to Lagos and one from Lagos to Kano. And then the fourth is industrialization. Because as agriculture succeeds, you need an outlet so you need agro-processing. So we want to stimulate agriculture. And particularly in agriculture, we want to stimulate particularly small and medium-scale enterprises. We also want to support the big enterprises. But the small and medium scale is where the greatest number of jobs are created. So we want to, through that, support them and stimulate industrialization. So let me stop there. That is basically a broad sweep of what the plan is all about.
And thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Dr. Dikbelu, we've had previous administrations come out with plans like this. We've had some Vision 2010, Vision 2020. What has been in the mind of people has been what makes this growth and recovery plan different from the previous ones that we've not been able to implement?
Thank you very much. I think the starting point is to say that, of course, if those plans had achieved their objectives, we would not be needing a plan of this nature. So you're right to pose that question, but the significant difference is delivery. That the plan emphasizes delivery so much that you have a delivery unit which is to be strengthened and established in the presidency, which will drive in particular the achievement of those 5 priorities. So with that delivery unit in place, what you do have is a means of tracking progress on implementation. But in addition to that, you have a process whereby we have merged budget and national planning together so that our long-term perspectives are taken care of on an annual basis through the budget. So you're also tracking annually through budget implementation, the implementation of your plan. So there's no divorce from short-term and long-term. But I must also add the elements that drives the plan are its principles. It has clear principles that are intended to act as a guide as to the kinds of policies you implement. So, for instance, you are committed to removing supply constraints in fuel, in power, in foreign exchange. So, insofar as you have those constraints, you know that you have things to tackle.
It's also committed to using the market mechanism. So in other words, when you are confronted with the problem of allocation, what is the best way to go about this allocation? So you are committed to saying, let's use a market principle, but making sure that we have proper government regulation. But it's most importantly committed to leveraging the power of the private sector, realizing that the government itself cannot do everything. It cannot find the money it needs all by itself. It cannot manage all the enterprises that need to be managed. And so just bringing the strength of the private sector to bear and allowing them to become the engine of growth is a principle that underpins the plan. What I'm trying to say is that, of course, there's the whole element of social inclusion. It's a plan that belongs to all Nigerians. So there's an element in the plan that pertains especially to the vulnerable. So there's a social inclusion element. In other words, this implementation is not only an elite thing, but it's something that stakeholders in the country have something to say. They're affected by the plan. So its implementation tallies to the progress of the nation in general. What I'm trying to say, therefore, is that with the emphasis on delivery, with the emphasis of underlying principles, and with the emphasis on aligning short and long-term plans together, you have a fighting chance, I think, of implementing successfully.
All right, Dr. Adeyemi, thank you. Well, let's return to the Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, in addition to the explanations that you both have given, clearly the EPRG, EPRG, that's correct, Economic Growth, Economic Recovery, ERGP. We'll get used to the mnemonics. ERGP. From the issues with regard to either the objectives or the priorities or the key indicators, this is work in progress. In other words, I mean, we're already rolling with aspects of infrastructure development, whether road, rail, or water transportation, agriculture. Agriculture has been, as it were, a major saving grace for the country in terms of the depth of the recession into which we would have sunk. And then you also look at restoration of macroeconomic stability, which is what both the CBN monetary policy and the Ministry of Finance on the other hand. But assuming all goes well, and at the end of 2020, what are we looking at?
Thank you very much. Just to comment on, yes, it is. The fact that we're unveiling it now doesn't mean it started today. It started the day we resumed office. We have been working. We've been working on all these various strategies, and we've been unfolding them, piecemeal. For instance, we had a strategy for agriculture, which we unfolded. We had a strategy for the oil and gas, which we unfolded. So this document is actually bringing everything together in one place, just to make it easy for people to see what we represent, what we stand for, and our objectives. So I just wanted to clarify that. Then what do we expect? We expect a major restructuring of the economy by the time we get to 2020. We expect to move from a recession, which we have now, and to grow at an average of 4% a year, and so that by 2020, we're growing at about 7%. That is our aim. We're also planning to make sure that by 2020, we are self-sufficient in petroleum products, that we are not importing, depending on imported petroleum products. So that is our target. We're also trying to make sure that by 2020, we're a net exporter of some of agricultural produce. That doesn't mean we will not import anything, we'll still import, but we want to be a net exporter. We have targeted a number of items, including rice, and wheat, and cashew nuts, and a lot of other things. So we want to really be, and we want to move to a more industrial economy. Now, this is only 2020 is only the first phase. The work will continue and must continue. You see, the thing in Nigeria is that, and anything in the world, basically, what you have to do is keep on doing the right thing over and over again for long enough. You have to just keep it up. So we would like the succeeding administrations and all that to continue along that path so that we can become a really industrial power. So 2020 is the medium term, is the first step, but we still need to continue along that path.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Let's bring in Professor Mike Obada, who's an economist from the University of Benin. Prof, you've been listening to the Honorable Minister and, of course, the Special Advisor to the President on Economic Matters. What do you make of this initiative? That's the recovery and the growth plan.
Thank you very much. Let me say, first of all, that I commend the initiative of the federal government in believing in planning. The case has been that at some points in the nation's history, planning was the vogue. At some other times, some governments did not believe in planning. Now, the present government, from the day it started, gave indications that it will want to plan the economy. And it began with the strategic implementation plan for 1 year for the 2016 budget. And now it has come up with this economic recovery and growth plan. So I strongly support the issue of planning. For one thing, given the challenges that the Nigerian economy, has been facing, challenges which border on structural imbalances, the country needs to plan to be able to, manage development in a very orderly, coherent, and disciplined way. And so the current initiative is commendable, and like the Honorable Minister has rightly pointed out, there are 3 clear, broad objectives, which I think adequately, reflect the current challenges facing the economy. The first of which is to restore macroeconomic stability to the economy. In other words, to improve on the macroeconomic environment, and in which event we're talking about making sure that we have stable prices, stable exchange rates, budget balance without huge, fiscal deficits, all of which tend to create problems in the economy. And then secondly, investment in the Nigerian people in terms of, achieving social inclusion, making sure that the millions of teeming youths that don't have jobs, have jobs, and then, generally promoting human capital development. And then the third broad objective, which the Honorable Minister rightly pointed out, which is in the plan, is to improve the environment of business. And clearly there are, strategies outlined in the plan, to achieve these objectives. So on that score, one would say that, it's generally a good plan. You have clear objectives stated against the backdrop of a vision, although I don't believe in that kind of vision in a medium-term plan like this. Broad goals would have been adequate, and then specific objectives. There are, strategies outlined for every issue indicated in the plan for every sector. And also, I think at the end of the plan, reflecting a kind of summary, we have an annex which shows the program, for various sectors, including the broad strategy, the key activities to be implemented, and then the ministry, department, or agencies of government that are responsible, for actualizing the objectives.
All right. Professor Mike Obada, thank you very much. Again, we'll come back to you in the course of the conversation to go over now to Kano, where Professor Ibrahim Shaka, of course, has been listening. Professor Shaka is a professor of Economics at Bayero University. Professor Sheka, let's get your overview of the ERGP in the first instance. What are your thoughts? The minister says, obviously, this is an aggregation of the various efforts and exertions by the government since it came into office nearly 2 years ago, and you now have a coherent plan, as it were, on moving the economy towards recovery and growth.
Thank you very much. Really, as we are all aware, Nigerian economy have been in deep recession since last year. And because most economic indicators are actually producing negative figures. Economists all over know that recession is something that comes and goes. It's not something new. It comes. What matters is how the policymakers face the problem, and that determines how long the recession lasts. One of our major complaints earlier than this time when this plan was actually rolled out was lack of economic planning. Since 70s and 80s, we have never had any coherent economic planning like this medium-term plan that has just been rolled out. So actually, I commend the effort of the federal government by coming up with this coherent and very logical and clearly defined, plan with objectives and principles. More particularly, I am more, feel interested in, the principles upon which the plan is actually based, tackling constraint to economic growth, and such as power supply, this issue of foreign exchange, and the unfriendly regulatory regimes that we are having in the country, and as well as emphasis on the private sector, removing bottlenecks and allowing private sector to operate freely. And also, again, there is this issue which is biting us, especially in the northern part of the country, this issue of national cohesion. The plan set it as a principle to tackle that problem and allow market to function very well, and uphold the core values, that is to instill this feeling, social justice and religious tolerance in the people, in the minds of Nigerians. So really, when you also look at the broad objectives of the plan, restoring economic growth, investing in people, like Professor had earlier pointed out, building a global competitive economy, these are all things that we are liking. So if this plan is really implemented, I'm sure we'll reach the promised land.
All right, Professor Sheka, thank you very much. We're having some glitches there with your audio connection. We do hope that the Skype remains clear for the remainder of our conversation. Now, to return to our Abuja studios, the Honorable Minister of Budget and National Planning, the other commentators, other than the special advisor who hasn't spoken on that aspect, although by indirection he did, they said if the plan is faithfully implemented. So there's always that caveat for those who are speaking up in support of the plan because of our national experience. Maybe we roll out some of the finest plans and proposals in the country. Then when it comes to implementation, we come up with all kinds of excuses. What are the assurances that this time around there will be faithful adherence to the strategic issues contained in the plan?
I think, first of all, it's clear that the leadership is committed. We have a committed president who says what he means, and so we have that political commitment to achieve it. And also, the methods that we're using. For instance, the delivery unit is going to be in the presidency. There's going to be a delivery unit in the presidency so that you will have the clout of the president behind it. In addition, the coordination will be done by my ministry. And as has been indicated, one of the things that the president did was when he swore in his ministers, he merged budget with national planning. Why did he do that? It is because he wanted to ensure that the budget, which is the main instrument through which government uses to carry out its projects, that that budget is aligned with the plan. So right from the beginning, it was very clear that this is where we were going. We're going to have planning as an important element, and then the budget to support the plan. So the budget flows out of the plan. In addition to that, we're going to have task forces. Every MDA will have meetings with task forces, set the clear goals, and then they will report. And every quarter, the Ministry of Budget and Planning will report both to the Federal Executive Council and then subsequently to the Nigerian people. So monitoring, reporting, those are the things that you use, the instruments you use to ensure that you perform. So we're determined, we're very, very determined to make sure that we perform. And also because the president is concerned, about the suffering of the Nigerian people. He wants to make sure that we deliver. He wants to make sure that these things are ameliorated. So those are the things that convince and should convince people that this is a plan that will work.
All right, still on the delivery unit, I mean, Dr. Adeyemi, again, maybe you speak on this further. Exactly what are we looking at? When is the monitoring kicking off? As we said, this is work in progress. And how does that align with our budget performance, 2015, 2016?
Thank you. I think it's important to distinguish monitoring and evaluation from the delivery unit. Monitoring and evaluation goes on and continues to go on even under the current dispensation. And it's linked very much indeed to the annual budget cycle. So you are given a quantum of resources and you're expected to achieve certain targets. So there is a dedicated unit in the Ministry of Budget and National Planning that is entrusted with tracking budget implementation. The delivery unit is more like, if you want to call it, a SWAT team. It's intervene where there are bottlenecks. You're not the direct implementation agency. Implementation will go on in the responsible ministries. But where you need coordination, if you need to bring two ministries together to sort out a problem, the delivery unit comes in and helps sort out that problem. If a matter needs to be escalated to the highest levels of government, the delivery unit escalates that to the highest level of government. If there are bottlenecks with other actors and players within the economy, delivery unit will use the convening power of the presidency to bring all stakeholders together to unravel some of those things. And some of these things are already happening as we speak. So it's just going to be a formalization of a process and making it something that people do full-time rather than on an ad hoc basis.
Is there a benchmark for this? Is there a timeline for each of this?
There are timelines for activities. Okay. But that's what the minister was talking about, linking short-term plans to long-term plans. We will break down the plan into the annual budget cycle. So last year there was a strategic implementation plan. If you look at it, it was detailed. It gave you the activities that we expected to be undertaken in the course of the year, the quantum of resources available for those activities to be taken, and how those activities link to other sectors of the economy. So indeed, as you move ahead, once the budget, if you look at the budget and you look at the economic recovery and growth plan, you will see an alignment. You see what I'm trying to say? So that alignment, once the budget is passed, you will then have your automatic targets for the year, which have been established, which are aligned to the economic recovery and growth plan.
Is the 7% GDP growth realistic? That's one thing people have been talking about. Is it realistic? Is this something that we can achieve within, would I say, the next 3 years now? We just have 3 years left.
Yes, okay. It's realistic for several reasons. It's realistic first and foremost because the kind of economy that Nigeria is requires ambition. You are growing, your population growth rate is almost 3-4%. If you don't grow at 7%, you might as well just stand in one place. That's the first problem. But the most important thing, look at the trajectory of growth between 2000 and even up to 2013. We were growing at about 6-7%, but it was jobless. We couldn't create jobs for our people. So it's not the ability to get 7% that is that difficult. And if you have all engines firing, The private sector is firing. The constraints are taken away from their ability to perform. We sort out the problems of foreign exchange. We sort out the problems of fuel supply. We meet power. People are able to get power, affordable, constant power. Then, of course, you are set for liftoff. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say so, but if you read the Economist of last week, Thursday, when they commented on the plan, they said that if these things happen, Nigeria is set for liftoff. And that's a foreign commentator commenting on our plan, I think, in very positive terms.
And maybe I'd just like to add something to that. I think you shouldn't underestimate the capacity of the Nigerian people for hard work, for effort. Once you show people the way, it's amazing, you know, how much that they can do. We believe in it. We believe in the capacity of Nigerian people, because ultimately, development is going to be about the people. It's going to be people who are going to farm. It's going to be people who are going to do the manufacturing and all that. And we have the people. So if you have the people, why not? We can't grow at that. If we put our people back to work, we have a high level of unemployment. Can you imagine all those people going back to work? Can you imagine the productivity? It was just, so we just have to realize that we have the capacity to do it. Lead our people will produce.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's return to Benin Network Studios. Professor Mike Obada, now we're talking about the numbers. My colleague Rhoda asked the question whether the projections are realistic. Now, against the background of the several consecutive quarters of recession that we've had, the first quarter of 2017 is almost coming to a close, so probably the brass spots won't be out, according to some experts, until the second quarter. Are you hopeful that we can turn the negative integers into positive growth within a short time and then hit 7% by 2020?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. Let me say that in the context of a plan or planning, it's desirable to be optimistic, but to realize, you know, such optimism, then the needful, the basic things, you know, will need to be done. In this context, you know, I'm not so sure that you know, we are geared towards doing the basic things that will, you know, enable the country to realize 7% growth rate, you know, or more. It's very desirable if the country can grow at 7%. That, you know, will provide a basis to, you know, lifting the people out of poverty and all that. And you will recall that the Vision 2020 Economic Transformation Blueprint actually projected a growth rate of more than 10% as the desired growth rate that can, you know, achieve the broad objectives of poverty reduction, growth, and all that one. Now, why I say that I'm not, you know, that optimistic about the 7% growth rate is that there appears to be something missing, you know, from this recovery and growth plan. We have, as at now, what I can describe as a policy plan or strategic plan. It is not the traditional kind of plan, comprehensive plan, which shows us, you know, what government will do in the area of policy, strategies, and then investments. You will find that, you know, completely missing from this plan is the program of investment activities for various ministries, departments, and agencies of government. Now, we would be able to talk about, you know, the realism or otherwise of the 7% growth plan if we had known the directions, you know, that the ministries, departments, and agencies of government, you know, will be moving in the area of investment. And that is apparently missing, you know, from this plan. And so you cannot really say from this plan that, oh, yes, it is realistic, in 7% growth rate is realistic, or not realistic. Yes, the macroeconomic projections, do indicate, gross domestic investment that will be undertaken by government, over the 4-year period, about 3 trillion beginning from 2016, and then 2-point-something trillion, in 2020. That is gross domestic investment. What is the net investment that the federal government is expected to, achieve, to implement, over the 4-year period? What, will be the investment for the key driving sectors, that can promote, growth? That obviously is missing. And to the extent that is missing, then something can still be done by way of having a complementary investment plan to this, strategy plan that has been drawn up. I say this against the backdrop of the Vision 2020 document, Economic Transformation Blueprint, and then the first National Implementation Plan, which was a comprehensive plan. But this plan has been drawn up within the framework of the Vision 2020. So we don't really know where this one fits in. Is it a continuation, of, the first implementation plan, or is it coming out of nowhere? So as it were, the macroeconomic projections, could be described as realistic if basic investment plans were to be, formulated, and then we see them, and then appraise them. And then the prospects of achieving the investment programs would also be, appraised. Now, issue of basic framework. Revenue crisis has been one of the undoing in the last 2 years or so. Luckily, the plan, hopes to have improved revenue, and against the backdrop of increased oil production. Well, I believe that, yes, the projection for crude oil production, is realistic to the extent that the present initiative by the federal government to achieve, peace in the Niger Delta region, is sustained, and actually militancy activities, end. If that is the case, then the projected oil production, can be realized, and in that sense will be judged to be realistic. And again, if we are lucky that the prices of oil in the world market fairly stabilize at over 50 or much more, then definitely funds in terms of foreign exchange and domestic revenue will largely be available to implement the investment program. But I think some other projections, appear not, well, let me not say not realistic, but I say overly optimistic. The projections for inflation, the projections for unemployment, we are very optimistic. The plan is very optimistic that, the inflation rate will go down from the current 18% to 9%, and then unemployment will reduce, drastically to about 11%. Well, it's only when we are able to achieve reasonable growth, in other words, national output increases and employment increases, supply increases, then we can say, yes, the inflation rate can go down. But then we will also have to worry about the cost push elements, of inflation other than output. So generally, I will say that it's desirable, to have a fairly optimistic, growth rate projection. But then we must, have the complementary investment program, provide necessary funding for it, and then also develop the capability to implement, capital budgets. Because the Honorable Minister mentioned that, yes, the annual budget will flow from the plan. But that is if we now have a complementary investment plan. And if we have that plan, then we must develop the capacity, for the MDAs to be able to implement the capital budget, because over the past years, that has been the bane of budgeting. We budget, very huge sums of money for the capital investment program. At the end of the year, less than 50% is implemented. And if less than 50% of the annual capital budget is implemented, then there is no way really we can say we'll be able to realize the growth projections, and other favorable projections that have been made in the plan.
Professor Michael Badan, thank you very much. Let's bring in Professor Shekar. Professor Shekar, are we, just as Kingsley asked, are we being too ambitious, 7% growth? And is 3 years actually enough to put us on the path of full recovery?
Hello, pardon?
All right, I actually, what I said was, aren't we being too ambitious? We're looking at 7% GDP growth in the next 3 years, and it's the next 3 years actually enough to put us on the path of full recovery?
I cannot hear. Honestly, audio is bad.
Okay, all right. So we'll get back to you probably in the course of the program. Let's our engineers sort that out. But then, Honourable Minister, there are key sectors of the economy that is going to drive this growth and recovery plan. How are you getting them to buy into it so that we don't see people working at cross purposes?
Okay, before getting into that, let me make a comment on some of the things that the Prophet said about the activities. We do have the activities, which were prepared for the next 3 years. So we will later on publish part 2, would you say, of this thing that sets them out. We do have them. We're further refining them and so on. So we do have that. So I do agree with him that that is part of what is required, and we are working on that. Now, with regard to your question was about
There
which
are
are
key
the
sectors that's going to drive this
Okay.
recovery and economic growth within the next 3 years. How are you getting them to buy in? Because if they don't buy into this plan, would have you, the government working at, and the sectors working at cross purposes?
It's a very important issue. Very, very important, because we say that we are leveraging the private sector. The activities, most of the activities that will create jobs and drive this economy are in the private sector. So what we are doing is we're engaging constantly and continuously with the private sector. We engage with them as in different groups in different sectors. The Ministry of Investment will also be looking at the different sectors. So we'll look at, for instance, tomato processors. We'll look at people in agro-processing. We'll look at people in textiles. So we'll look at every single sector, meet with them, define targets, work with them, establish what their bottlenecks are, because we said we want to remove all bottlenecks. We want to make sure that we can restore growth by removing bottlenecks. So we'll look at it sector by sector. The way that is the best approach. It's a very pragmatic approach. So every single sector. And so they will have clarity in terms of what government expects from them. We will also listen to them and see what additional things that we need to do, what incentives that we need. We'll also set them targets. And as far as incentives are concerned, one of the ways that we want to design our incentives is based on performance, not intention. Lots of times, you get an incentive, you promise to do something, you don't do it. So we will not do it that way. We will commit to an incentive, but based on your performance. So as you perform, we give you a bit more incentive. As you perform, we give you a bit more incentive. So those are the ways. I myself am from the private sector. I came from the private sector. So I'm familiar with target setting. I'm familiar with those sorts of things. And so we want to try and work with the private sector, work with them, collaborate with them, get that confidence, get investment going again. And those are the ways that we plan.
All right, Honorable Minister, just while we are still on this, I would like us to address an issue which has to do with what you've been talking about, namely, this is what the federal government intends to do. This is how the federal government intends to coordinate and rally, the different MDAs and private sector. What do we expect to see in terms of collaboration and cooperation from the subnational governments?
Yes, that's very important. This is a government that we've been working very closely with the states. We have the National Economic Council, and that meets every month unfailingly. His Excellency, the Vice President, chairs it. At each of those meetings, we brief governors about what we are thinking about our economic plans, and we work together with them and take them through. In addition to that, when we're preparing this, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, we had extensive discussions with the commissioners of planning of the various states. We also presented at every stage of where we were also to the governors. And so then, if you recall, last year, we organized a retreat, the first quarter of last year, with all the governors, where we identified what are the steps that we need to take in terms of reviving the economy. And we looked at how we can collaborate and work closely, particularly in such areas as agriculture. Indeed, anytime we have a task force, like for instance in agriculture, we work with the governors. So we work with the governors on ease of doing business. Most of the things happen in the states. So we invited the Minister of Investments came and spoke to all the governors and explained to them where we were, which is about 169 out of our 190, and that we want to come down within the next 4 years to below 100, and what the role of the state government in achieving that. So we have one economy. Unless you're working closely with the state government, we cannot achieve this Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. So we bear that in mind, and we work closely with the state governors.
I'm wondering, Professor Ibrahim Shaka, we understand that our lines are clear back to you via Skype. If you can hear me clearly, the Honourable Minister is just explaining the expectations of the subnational governments and from the subnational governments with regard, to getting the appropriate numbers, including the 7% growth at the end of 2020. But from our various interactions, take for instance on the aspect of improving competitiveness, that is to say, ease of doing business, a major complaint that you find from business owners has to do with their experiences at the state level. States and local governments running after IGRO, crippling their operations, and so on and so forth. The minister says that they have spoken to the state governments. Are the state governments listening, or how do you make them listen?
I think it is not enough to say, it's only the problem from the state governments or local governments. I think the whole thing, if you're talking about international competitiveness, it all rests on available infrastructure. If the manufacturers have to use generators and they have to use diesel, then certainly their cost of producing is going to be high. And by the time they get out of the country to sell what they produce, their prices are not going to be competitive. So really, apart from the multiple taxes and in fact so much taxes collected by the state and local governments, I think there is also need for government to, as a matter of urgency, provide the infrastructure necessary for the industrial sector to actually produce at a low average cost. And you see, about this projection of 7% growth, it's good to make an overambitious projection, but really, I have some fear, just like Professor Mike had already, said something about it. For instance, we know this plan is meant to end in 2020. And probably, if this government reaches up to 2020, then certainly we may expect full implementation. But we are lacking that issue of continuity. Just like Professor said, we had Vision 2020, we had all these conferences organized by Obasanjo administration and Jonathan, but the documents are there, well articulated, well prepared, but none of them was implemented. And again, of course, the success of this plan depends on projections, oil price projections, as well as oil production projections, which all depend on secondary factors. Oil prices are not determined by Nigeria, so we have to probably, after projecting figures, we also have to pray for the oil price to stabilize. And of course, oil production also depends on the relative peace in the Niger Delta. If the peace is maintained, if the Niger Delta militants are actually accommodated by the government and negotiated with, then that position of 2.5 million barrels can be achieved. And again, you see, another thing is this policy, this plan seems to be based on the balanced growth model. You know, what I mean is the federal government wants to do everything at the same time. At the time when we are complaining about inadequate funds, I think there may be some problems because most of these things they want to do requires some funding. So if we are going to do everything at the same time, then certainly we have to look for funds to do that. And unfortunately, in this plan, I've not seen any section that talks about the I proposed $29.6 billion loan that government wants to actually collect from the foreign and domestic sectors. So I think one important thing is really this objective is achievable only if government will be very serious about the implementation. And like I've seen, from the look of seeing, this plan is actually made by experts. So if experts will be involved in the implementation and they'll be given free hand to say what is right about it, then certainly it is achievable. So, but really, when you talk about competitiveness, that is one of the major problems. We want, through diversification, industrial sector, agricultural sector, to fetch dollars like the oil sector is fetching. But unfortunately now, if you come down to Kano, as an example, you will see that the domestically produced rice and the foreign rice are only having a difference of 500 or less naira. The price is, if the foreign rice is selling 20,000, the Nigerian made in Nigerian rice is also selling around 20,000. So we wonder what kind of situation. Probably government is not doing anything about the internal pricing or whatever. But rice imported 20,000 kilometers away with all the duties, with all the transportation reaching Kano, the price is almost the same with the rice produced in Kano. So this kind of thing, if we now say, okay, Nigerian rice is 20,000 in Kano, and we want to export it to Niger or Benin or Chad or Cameroon, then by the time you reach there, you meet this one rice selling 5,000, then we are not going to compete. Our rice cannot actually fetch any dollar. So I think that is what government should take if we really have to be competitive internationally.
So thank you very much, Professor Garba Ibrahim Shekar. We thank you very much for joining us on this discussion this morning. Professor Garba Ibrahim Shekar is an economist from the Bayero University. It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria. All right, time now for us to take some of our tweets, and after we take the tweets, we would like to also get a reaction from our guests here in the studio. Nigerians are actually reacting to this. The very first one is from Innocent Lowell James. He said, federal government should have a sustainable plan that will make the economy a resilient one, not only to exit us from a recession only.
This is from, excuse me, this is from Tinubu Ayodeji. Says federal government should pay arrears of civil servants to allow for economic recovery if truly they intend to invest in the people.
And Dele Jackson Solomon tweets, the aim of the ERGP is to increase national productivity and achieve sustainable diversification of production.
And then we have this from Ahmed Muhammad. It says planning for restructuring by 2020 will not be possible without total commitment and political will.
Asani Michael Omokoji tweets, Honorable Minister, we don't want to hear too much grammar here. When would the power sector be fixed?
And Ayuk, ease of doing business, better educated and heavier workforce, productivity at home, especially where there is comparative advantage. These are the key issues.
Festus Akimboyewa tweets, ERGP will not fix the foundation of our economy and reverse our long-term productivity problem if there is no money to pump into the economy.
And then we have this from Basi Etim Ikang. The economy needs backward integration to stimulate local content and domestic production.
James Olua Tosin tweets, no matter how federal government tries to put the economy in good position, if the state governments are not dealt with seriously to do what they ought to do, then this would not work.
Then Festus Akimboyewa, production will make Nigeria stronger and families richer. Government should create new projects that will give millions of Nigerians work.
And those are the tweets that we're taking for now. Honourable Minister, I would like you to also react to some of this. And just as Professor Shekar said earlier, funding all of this is very important. And some of the tweets we've said, we just took saying that we need money to fund all of this.
Yes, I think, let me react to that. You know, some people say, why are we still relying on oil? Because we need funding. We need funding to do all those good things to get out of dependence on oil. So it's a bit of a paradox that we need money from oil in order to strengthen the non-oil so that we can get out of dependence. And that is why we are concerned about making sure that we maximize the revenues that we can get from oil. So that is one of the ways that we're trying to make sure. Then two, we're reducing leakages. A lot of the waste and the leakages, we're reducing them. There was a lot of waste in government. So we're looking at, for instance, we have a presidential committee of continuous audit that looks at the way we do business, look at the cost of things, and try to make sure that we save money. We even look at our payroll and make sure that we don't have people who are not actually employed being paid. So we're reducing, so that is one way that we're creating revenues, is by reducing them. Then we're looking at more efficiency in our tax collection. The FIRS, trying to make sure that it uses more computerized systems and make sure that people pay their taxes. So we're looking at increasing that. We're looking at efficiencies in customs as well. Then we're also looking at the various agencies of government where there is a lot of things that are applied for non-essential or things that ought not to be there. So the Accountant General has issued guidelines, a template, to try and make sure that we harvest as much money, you know, from the various government agencies. But of course, even after that, even after the crude oil, even after we can maximize revenues from crude oil, even after reducing the wastages, even after increasing the tax collection, even after increasing the customs, we still have a funding gap. And that is where borrowing comes in. But the borrowing is aimed at capital projects which will create, enhance our capacity, you know, to be able to pay back. So those loans we're monitoring and ensuring, because we have a debt management office that monitors and makes sure that the borrowing is within our capacity, so we never run into trouble with that. So those are the things I would like to say in a nutshell.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you very much. Dr. Adeyemi, let's decompose one of the priority areas, energy self-sufficiency, by 2020, which is another 3 or 4 years away. And some persons, of course, will wonder if, in spite of the licenses that have been issued to persons, for instance, to build refineries, and we haven't seen any new refinery in this country for many years, although Dangote is grappling with one in the Lagos area. How are we likely to achieve energy self-sufficiency other than power? We're just talking about now, you know, fuel, you know, diesel, petrol, and so on and so forth, which, of course, provide the major source of forest leakage for us.
Thank you, Kingsley. I think, first of all, I would like to react to some of the things that have been said, to say that this plan itself is a strategic indicative plan, but it was underpinned by data that already exists in the medium-term expenditure framework, MTEF. So the figures, they were not just plucked from the air, they exist somewhere. And those MTEFs are accompanied by what you call medium-term sector strategies. So as the Honorable Minister said, what we're trying to do is now to take those things together and put them out in a way that would then become the kind of investment plan that Professor Obadan was talking about. I think I should also speak about the macroeconomic numbers. For instance, he said he looked at inflation, for instance. Yesterday, the report came out. Inflation is already down for the first time in 15 months. It fell to 17.8 yesterday. So again, that prediction we've made that it was cost push and that it will begin to have an inverted U curve shape is coming true. We're at 17 now. So to make 15 in 2-3 years, I don't think should be too difficult. Now let's talk about unemployment.
Yeah, but if you look at where we're coming from, that's still steep.
Yes, but let me finish.
Yes.
Unemployment, again, there is a jobs and skills program in that plan. For instance, just through direct employment alone, the federal government is committed to employing on a biennial basis 500,000 young graduates. There were revenue challenges, but 200,000 young people have been taken off the street. If you know what that means, even in economic stimulus terms, to their parents, spending less on the kid who is sitting at home, and that kid now can spend money to buy things for himself. Those are important things, but more importantly, there's an element that works with the private sector. We're working closely with the private sector in construction, in IT, in tourism, and all those things to try and create the jobs. I thought it was important because we don't want to appear as if some of those figures are just being fancifully derived, but they're based on concrete analysis. Now, again, on the issue of revenues, I want to say, as the minister put it beautifully, but just to lighten up the mood, that you have to use what you have to get what you need. Yes. So if you have it, why not use it? So the question about whether you are using oil or not shouldn't arise. You have it. So you have to use it and leverage it to the maximum advantage. But now coming to your question about energy self-sufficiency, particularly fuel. But you answered the question yourself. The Dangote refinery alone will produce 650,000 barrels of oil a day, refined product a day. Current national consumption, even just using the estimate of the allocation to NNPC, is 445,000 already. And I'm sure we're not even using up to that, because once there was the fuel price adjustment, the amount of demand for petroleum products actually reduced a bit. So what I'm trying to say is that even just the private sector plan, and that's what I want to emphasize, that the idea is to crowd in the private sector. The idea is to recognize that by itself, if government chooses to do it, it has neither the resources nor the reach to do it. So I think that question is already answered just by that refinery alone. But it's also important to understand that energy self-sufficiency will also take place through the use of renewables. So I think we already have a number of solar power purchase agreements in place, so that we're also improving the energy mix in addition to trying to sort out the fuel problem.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Dikbe Olu, Special Advisor to the President on Economic Matters. We're indeed out of time. I would love to say a very big thank you to our guests in Benin, and that's Professor Mike Obadan. Wish we had more time to talk to you. Thank you very much. Professor Mike Obadan joined us from Benin. He's an economist from the University of Benin. Thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
All right, we also want to thank you, Dr. Dikbe Olu, ADM, Special Advisor to the President on Economic Matters. Thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
And of course, the Honorable Minister, we want to also thank you very much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you for inviting us.
All right. We'll take a break now, and when we return, our second topic for conversation. But just before we do that, we already got some of your tweets and would like to take them immediately. All right, Kinti.
All right, we have this from Mane Akman. It tweets, education is the key to sustainable economic, economic growth. An illiterate populace is a death knell of government policies. Invest in education. And then we have another one from Ibrahim Tudu. It says the plan should not be left to civil servants alone. There should be the buy-in of all stakeholders, publicity, sensitization, and education.
And Ibrahim Tudu tweets, with utilization of stream plants, that's SIP, to drive 2016 budget, ERGP, if properly monitored with political will, positive growth is imminent.
All right, and then we have this from Saminu Sanusi. I hope economic recovery will be effective when the Nigerian government puts more emphasis on social investment. Well, those are the tweets that we can take. In the meantime, we thank you for your contributions to this conversation. Of course, it's work in progress, and then we'll return to the subject matter sometime in the future. Let's take a break now.
Does it make common sense to you to be unhappy the morning right after the night you were happy? Did your elders teach you that wisdom is captured in these 3 sentences? Make money, spend money, have no money.
How can you ask a man to spend 18 million on marrying you when I can use that same amount to marry an entire community?
If we spend the money, 80 million, know that the man is a thief.
What do you think?
My thinking machine is having problems.
That is what you do when you put all you have into a party to impress those who may not even afford to spend like that.
See, I'm planning a birthday bash with a sum of 2 million naira.
Expensive ceremonies. It's another funny and educative episode of your rib-cracking comedy. Professor John Bull, showing at 8:30 p.m. every Tuesday and Friday on NTA Network International and Star Times.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
Welcome to the new speed of life.
Okay, sir. You may now go in for your interview.
Thank you. Ah, my shoe. And to think I just bought this very expensive foreign shoe 2 months ago.
So sorry about your shoes. This is why I advise my friends to always patronize made in Nigeria products. See this shoe. It's made in Nigeria. And I've had it for 2 years. And it's still as good as the day I bought it.
Made in Nigeria products are good quality. And stringent government regulations and certification now mean that goods made in Nigeria meet international standards. Make the patriotic choice today. Buy right. Buy Made in Nigeria.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Imagine what will happen if selected intelligent Nigerian youths live together and brainstorm for 60 days with over 200 million eyes watching. Get ready, Nigeria. Something big is coming.
All right, welcome back. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria. Earlier on, we told you we'll be having 2 issues for discussion this morning, and now the second one, which is on skills acquisition for national development. The ERGP is anchored on developing a knowledge-based economy, of course, which is very critical. This is the skills acquisition. We have discussed this several times, and the Industrial Training Fund is statutorily charged with this role. And joining us to discuss this and how it's being done is Sir Joseph Ari. He's the Director General of ITF. That's Industrial Training Fund. Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
All right, but Sir Joseph, we just finished the conversation on the economic recovery and growth plan of the federal government. And one of the key objectives of that is, to develop the people, to grow the people in terms of knowledge, in terms of skills. And one of the commonest complaints, I'm sure you are also familiar with this, that employers are saying, look, we are looking for persons who are employable. We are looking for the requisite skills of the 21st century. What is the ITF doing in this regard?
Well, thank you very much. Let me begin by reiterating what I have said at different fora, that the economic diversification and industrialization policy of the President Muhammadu Buhari's administration is actually the direction to go, because it is the pathway for economic recovery and growth. However, skills acquisition remains a clear component of that plan. Even if you take the investment sector alone, you would find out that investors, when they come in, they would want to know, first of all,
the skills match, the skill set that are available and inherent in the economy of a nation. And therefore, particularly when you juxtapose it with the expatriate quota system, where they are meant to bring just a quota. So they will rely on the indigenous manpower to run and to oil the wheel therein production. Therein comes the Industrial Training Fund. One thing that is clear and desirable and good for the country is that we have abundance human capital. And we could use that comparative and competitive advantage to our own growth. The Industrial Training Fund, in order to key and align itself with the policy of government towards economic recovery and growth, has developed different strategies and also put in the front burner skills acquisition to develop the vast human capacity of this nation, so that using the comparative and competitive advantage of population would be able to grow a huge pool of indigenous manpower sufficient to meet the needs of both the public and private sectors of our economy.
And what are the programs that you have put together?
One of the flagship programs which we commenced from the 1st of this month is a National Industrial Skills Development Program. And that program takes into cognizance the training, the impartation of skills to young men and women in 18 states for the first run. And this is under one of our quick fixes, one of our quick wins, because we've been able to develop the plan according to quick win, medium and long-term plans. And the National Industrial Skills Development Program is a program that goes into the states, picks out young men and women who are unskilled, develop those young men and women, and those states would have to have the dominant traits come into picture. We are collaborating with both the state governments, the organized private sector, and at the end of the day, it is a key component also of the Nigerian Industrial Revolution Plan.
What are the examples of the skill set you are teaching or you're seeking to impart to these persons picked out from 18 states?
Okay, for example, you could go to one state, pick out the dominant traits. It could be welding and fabrication, it could be fishery, it could be confectionaries, it could be poultry, agribusiness, and so on and so forth. Hands-on skills, skills that would be able to turn, the entrepreneurial capacity of individuals, so that at the end of the day, such individuals could even turn into employers of labor rather than rely on the white-collar jobs that are really scarce or hard to come by.
Well, Sir Joseph, I mean, when you talk about the Industrial Training Fund, yours is not an infant establishment. I mean, it's been around since it was established by military decree in 1971, more than 45 years old now, as it were. And one recalls, again, several decades ago, that the ITF was very prominent in terms of supplementing industrial attachment programs for students who were in school, beginning with polytechnics and then later on universities if we were studying so-called technical courses. But these days, students undergo industrial training or industrial attachment. There appears to be no support from the ITF. And when they graduate, assuming those who do not have the benefit of industrial attachment, employers are at a loss as to what skills they have to engage them. So how is the ITF responding to this?
Well, you need to know that the Students' Industrial Work Experience Scheme was not created to just provide jobs right away. It was meant to serve, and it's still meant to serve as addressing the disconnect between the issues of theory and practice. And we have realized that that need is very essential, because you find a student in the four corners of the university come out, for example, with engineering course, and yet does not know even an aspect or a component of the machine he has read about in the university. Hence, the ITF developed the Students' Industrial Work Experience Scheme so that before graduation, the students would have access to the industries and then learn on the job, on the machines they are taught theoretically, so that by the time they come out of school, they will be well placed and prepared for the world of work experience. And that's the essence. It's a very, very laudable program. It is practiced in faraway nations like Germany, using also the apprenticeship scheme. However, over the years, the participants of the scheme grew in number. For example, while it was just meant for the universities and meant for engineering and technological courses, today it embraces both students from the universities, colleges of education, and polytechnics. As I talk to you now, the number is about 296 institutions that have keyed into the scheme. So when you conversely put this side by side, the budget, you find out that you would not have the required funds to address them. In Germany, for example, using the same scheme, the parents take the load of paying the stipends to the students. But the Nigeria government, by way of encouraging these students and participants of the scheme, gives these stipends to them to encourage them and also to encourage industries so that it's all on the same platform, developing the nation's human capital. So that by the time enough of paper qualification for our country, where you bandy a lot of paper qualifications but no hands-on jobs. We're now talking about hands-on job, and this is the sure way to develop the economy. That when you are skilled, because there are no diminishing returns in a skilled person.
Just recently, the ITF was focused on the skills for employment. How are you faring in that regard?
We are going very deep, and the collaboration is with the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association under the Technical Skills Development Project. And the program allows us to go partner with the organized private sector, using even some of their facilities. And as soon as we're able to develop and train the youths, you find out that as soon as they come out, they are found employable, and the industries embraces and absorbs them. We've done this over time, and we just signed a memorandum of understanding with NECA, test running with 19 participating organizations. And these organizations have leverage on the expertise of the ITF, working in consonance with the organized private sector, using their facilities to train young men and women for the industries.
All right, so Joseph, lastly, state governments or first ladies in the various states have their various PEC programs, often tied to skills acquisition. Are they on the same page with the ITF on this?
We are on the same page. However, we have also tried to drum the need to harmonize skills so that we don't become jack of all trade and master of none. When we harmonize and we have a clear direction using the platform government has provided through the enabling environment and through the policy, then we'll be able to be on the same page. For example, the NISDP program I talked to you about, we have reached out to the state governments, and we are running this in the states because unemployment is something that deals heavy blows to everybody, and the governors are also concerned about it. So what we have done with the governors is for us to train the young men and women, and then the government's providing the startup packs. So by the time they provide the startup packs and the youths are able to set up on their own, we also have M&E, the monitoring and evaluation policy and processes, to study and track how these individuals are doing. By the end of this training program with the startup packs, we are of the opinion and we believe strongly that these young men can set up on their own and have an impact positively on the economy.
Thank you very much, Sir Joseph Ari, Director General of the Industrial Training Fund. Thank you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
All right, let's move on now to sports, which is one of our complimentary segments for today.
Nigeria's CAF Champions League campaigners Enugu Rangers are scheduled to return to the country from Egypt today. Rangers announced via their Twitter handle on Monday that players and officials will return to Enugu at about 12 p.m. on Tuesday. Final of the Emirates FA Cup next month after seeing of Manchester United at the Stamford Bridge on Monday night and Sunday, April 23rd.
And just before we go, let's take a quick look at the weather prospects for the rest of the day.
Northern part of the country, wet across the inland of the south down to the coast. Although temperature values are still on the high side over the southern cities, but not as much as it were over the previous week. And now on to the forecast. We expect the northeastern flank of the country to be under sunny and hazy conditions, while other parts of the northern cities are expected to be sunny. From the southern fringes of the central state down to the coast, we expect partly cloudy conditions to prevail. Later in the day, we expect weather conditions over most parts of the country to remain unchanged, with the exception of the Niger Delta, Atijere, Ijebu-Ode, parts of Lagos, and the southeast, where localized thunderstorms are expected. Thank you for watching. See you again.
And that's it on Good Morning Nigeria for today. Remember, wherever the day takes you, remember it begins with us tomorrow morning at 7. I'm Rhoda Obo. Have a wonderful day.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. Thank you for being with us today. See you again tomorrow as well. Have a nice day.